Hello readers, welcome back to Books in the Park. Tell you what, it was a rough week last week. I'm sorry I missed you guys, but the whole family got the flu, and I'll tell you, I haven't been sick in a couple of years. My wife the same, and when you got a 5 and an 11-year-old also sick, it's a rough week. I didn't get a lot of reading done. Didn't really get a lot of anything done, truthfully. I don't know, call me a big wimp, but I couldn't get out of bed. I was in pain. But luckily everybody's on the mend now, and the last couple of days been able to get some reading done. Haven't really honestly felt like much else anyway, so it's been nice. But I thought I'd check in, see how you guys are doing, let you know what is going on with my reading. And since last time we talked, I've actually gotten a few more books completed, so I feel like maybe a little bit it's starting to hit my reading stride for the year. Last time I mentioned that I had a sluggish start, but I've finished a few things, including some of the ones that we talked about. So I did end up finishing that Craig Johnson book, the Longmire book, Junkyard Dogs is what it's called. And I went into after watching last time's video, I think I went into enough depth about it. I recommend it highly. I recommend the series highly, and I think that you'll love it. But definitely refer to my previous video if you want a little bit more in-depth discussion of it. So that was the first one that I finished. And I also ended up finishing The Gulf by Jack Davis, which is my first nonfiction book of the year. And it's about the Gulf, the Gulf of Mexico, and sort of its pre-European history, and then also the history since European settlement. And it's a nonfiction. So for me, nonfiction are a little bit harder to get into, that are a little bit more dense. I read them more slowly, but it reminded me a little bit of a PBS documentary that came out maybe 20 years ago or so, called National Parks. It reminded me of that, in that it creates a contrast between progress and the impacts of that progress, but also what we do to preserve and stay true to the natural beauty. So it's very much a book about sort of that dichotomy, and I enjoyed it. I don't know if it's for everyone. I have a particular interest for the Gulf, just because of the time that we've spent there. But for anyone who loves American history, I think it would, and really world history, it's a great book, and it's very focused, obviously, on a particular region, but it's very interesting. And there are many, chapters that I really enjoyed, but there's a chapter that follows an artist who just lives alone on this remote island and does painting and journaling. And there's a chapter that follows the history of the tarpon, which is a game fish, a world-class, world-known game fish, and sort of the history of how that came about as a popular game fish. And so yeah, it was very enjoyable. I liked it. I'm glad that I got off my first nonfiction book of the year, and I actually got some recommendations from a listener for some other nonfiction. So if you've got any other recommendations, definitely let me know. But The Gulf, it's a good one. Check it out. Okay, so in addition to those ones that we kind of already had talked about, I also read, I listened to, I consider it reading. I listened to a Stephen King book called Elevation, and it's a brief one. I think it was the equivalent of like 120 or 140 pages. It's only my second Stephen King book, but I read 11/22/63 last year, and I loved it, and so it's kind of turned me on to wanting to experience some more Stephen King. But anyway, I was kind of looking for just a quick little read / listen, and so I checked this one out through Libby, the library app, and I listened to it, and it's read by the author, which I think is always a good thing. And basically the story, it's an uplifting story. It's like quick, happy, and it'll turn, if you're having a rough day, it'll turn your day upside down, like or turn your day around. It's a great little story about basically like a guy experiences a bizarre sort of health phenomenon, and completely changes his life, and kind of ends up impacting the life of the town that he lives in. If you've read 11/22/63, there's a period of time where Jake, the main character, spends in Jody, Texas, and it kind of had the feel of that period of time when he's living there. So that's all I'll say. I don't want to say too much more, but if you have the opportunity to listen to it, and I would definitely take that opportunity. Stephen King actually reading it, I think, definitely elevates it. But if not, pick it up. It's one of those things that, I mean, I listened to it straight through in just a couple of hours. It's one of those things that if you read it, you could probably read it in one sitting too. But very enjoyable. It totally made my day, and again makes me want to read more Stephen King, which is interesting because now I've read 2 Stephen King books. Neither one of them, I would say, are what I would think of if I was describing Stephen King. You know, usually I just think of like the horror genre, you know, and neither one of those books, the ones that I've read, I would really describe as that, and yet they're 2 of my favorite books that I've read probably in the last year. So anyway, more Stephen King coming for me in the future. So that was one. That was a real brief one. And then what was the other thing I read? Oh, I read the 3rd book in the Thrawn trilogy. It's a Star Wars sort of spin-off. It's 3 books. Thrawn is, for those of you who don't know, I guess, you know, like a Darth Vader bad guy replacement. He's on the bad guy side, right? But he's a Grand Admiral for the Empire. And all I'll say is that, you know, I think for those of you who like Star Wars or seen Star Wars, I think the age, whatever age you are when you see it, makes a huge difference as far as like what you think about it and how you experience it. I saw Star Wars when I was, you know, 7 or 8 years old. And so, you know, the original Star Wars movies made a certain impact on me as a kid. But as you grow up, you kind of see, if you watch Star Wars again, you know, you see sort of the simplicity of, you know, good versus evil, light versus dark, you know, Darth Vader in a black costume with the red sword, and, you know, he's part man, part machine, and, you know, there's all these obvious sort of metaphors for, you know, the world and good and evil. But the thing that I really enjoyed about this series, this Thrawn series, is that Thrawn he's a, you know, a bad guy, but he's not obviously a bad guy. He has a lot of qualities that are, he's definitely a warrior, right? And he's somebody who wants victory, but he's also thoughtful. He likes art. He is strategic. He is a loyal leader. He promotes his people. He listens to their thoughts, and gets their feedback. And that, I think, is what gives him depth and gives these books depth. And frankly, it's sort of, I hesitate to say this, but it's more of an adultish type Star Wars. He's a complicated person, and truthfully, I don't remember anything. I could be wrong, I could be misremembering this, but I don't remember anything from the 3 books where I thought that he was, a necessarily evil person or an evil being. I guess he's not human. But anyway, so this was the 3rd one. It was called Treason, and I loved it. I mean, again, just like the Stephen King book, I mean, I think I read it in just one straight day of reading, maybe the weekend. It was very, very good. So anyways, I'm not sure if you're into Star Wars, but whether you are or whether you aren't, that trilogy is very good, and you don't have to know a whole lot about Star Wars to enjoy it. There's plenty of sort of backstory and explaining for those of you who aren't familiar with it. So anyway, those are the books that I read. As far as what I'm reading, I'm actually only reading one thing right now, and that's partially just because I've been sick. I haven't had the time and energy to kind of dedicate to anything else, but I'm reading Sphere by Michael Crichton, and last year I reread Jurassic Park. I read that when I was, I don't know when the movie came out, maybe in the early 90s. I was maybe in 6th or 7th grade, and I read Jurassic Park, and last year I reread it and I loved it, and I ended up reading the second one and loved it. And so I guess I just kind of on an unofficial little project to reread some of the books I read when I was younger. And so I remembered enjoying this one also when I was a kid, and so anyway, so I started reading that again, and I'll get more into what that one's all about when I finish it next week. It shouldn't take me too long. It's a real quick read. But yeah, that's what I'm reading right now. And I think that might be kind of like an ongoing thing for me, like rereading the books, some of the books that I read when I was a kid or when I was in high school or whatever, because one, a lot of them are really good, but two, like now as an adult and as a parent and a husband, it's interesting to kind of see how you interpret things or enjoy things differently than you did when you were a kid. And so it's just kind of fun to kind of do that, to reread sort of my classics, the books that I love. So I'm going to look forward to like getting up in the attic and opening some boxes of the old books and see if there's anything else in there that I want to go back through again. So yeah, so that's kind of like a future reading project for me. And then I've also been thinking about maybe doing a little bit of, as I kind of plan out the year to get some motivation for reading for the year, I've been trying to think of another project. And I'm thinking here, we live in North Texas, which is like in the Dallas area, Dallas region. There's been, as well as other places in the country, controversy about, banning books in schools. And maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago, there was this organization that was going to all the school board meetings, and they didn't have kids at the schools or anything like that, but they would just show up to the school board meetings and demand that the school boards ban these books. And I know I've mentioned it before several times, but I've got 3 kids. All 3 of them are in schools. And so, obviously I don't want my kids, interacting with things that are not appropriate for them or that are not age appropriate for them. But we're a house of readers, and, for the most part, we kind of let our kids, read what they're capable of reading. And we use those as discussion points, as starting points for talking about the world and learning about the world. But But I thought it would be interesting because this group that was coming to these school board meetings, they've got like a list of like 500 books. Now, I'm not like the world's like most avid reader, but I read I don't know anybody else who reads as much as me and my wife do. I read 60 some books last year. Like, it would take me a long time to read 500 books and to know that those 500 books were inappropriate for everybody else's kids. So, and I imagine that most parents are in that same boat where they're trying to protect their kids, or they're, trying to listen to this, or, this organization that they trust, or they're completely against the organization, or whatever it might be. But I doubt anybody on either side has really read very many of these books. So I was just thinking about going through and, going through the list and pulling a couple of titles off and seeing what they are and read them and give you guys like just my honest perspective as a dad and a parent. Hey, like, I wonder why this book is banned. Here's my thoughts about it. Here's what you might be concerned about as a parent. Here's what you might not be concerned. Here are my thoughts. Here's how I would handle it with my 13, 11 and 5-year-olds. So anyway, so I was thinking about doing that, going through the list, and I don't know, I think it could be interesting as kind of like an ongoing series, and just approach it with an open mind and give you my feedback. But anyway, let me know what you think. Is that something that you guys would find to be interesting? Or are there other topics or other, books or genres that you'd be interested in hearing about? So anyway, I hope you guys are feeling good out there, and hope nobody in your family is sick. Hope the weather's nice where you are. It's gone from 20 degrees to about 70 degrees, so it feels like spring all of a sudden. But I hope the weather is nice where you are also, and I appreciate you guys checking in. If you could like and subscribe, I'd appreciate it. Have a great day, and happy reading.